Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the AXR Sales Director Incubator, the program that helps you make great career decisions. My name is Mike Dixon. I lead the sales and marketing practice here at AXR Recruitment and Search. And today's guest is Ollie Tatlow. Hi, Ollie. How are you this morning?
Very well this morning. Thank you, Mike. And a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Briefly, guys, I'll give you an intro to Ollie and then we'll explore his career as we go. But so Ollie started his career in the UK as a grad with Mars before moving to the startup business Innocent Drinks. And he moved to Australia to join Reckitt some 11 or 12 years ago, and subsequently then moved to New York to take on a big role there, back to the UK and then back to Australia, and now leads the hygiene business for Australia and New Zealand. So we'll get into what that role is like as we go on, Ollie. But as always, we'll start with a couple of just I guess questions on you to get a sense of you as an individual, Ollie, and a couple of guests I've asked this question to. I'm a voracious reader, mainly fiction, but I do kind of like the odd book on whether it's biographies or business books as well. But what for you, is it fiction or fact, and what are you reading?
Yeah, look, I think for me, Mike, certainly in this kind of COVID period, it's been much more kind of fact and history. I think I've sought some solace in hearing what the human race has been able to achieve in the past and what challenges we've been able to sort of surmount, and I've really enjoyed that. So the book I'm actually reading at the moment is a book about the neighborhood that I live in, King's Cross. It's by Louis Nowra, and he goes through all the various neighborhoods surrounding the Cross, Poss Point, Elizabeth Bay, Rushcutters, and he tells the history by street, and it's fantastic. And why I enjoy it is, given we've been pretty much locked up in our neighborhoods, reading this gives me a new perspective when we walk around. So I'm going around, my daughter and I can tell her all these fascinating stories about the Razor gangs. How about two ladies effectively ran the underworld in the Cross, in the 30s, Tilly Devine and Kate Lee. So yeah, I love history, but most recently it's kind of neighborhood history, I'd suggest. Yeah.
So Ollie Tatlow, tour guide of the Cross.
Absolutely, of the Cross and hopefully kind of other areas. No, I really enjoy it.
Yeah, fantastic. It's funny, actually. I found myself, as you say, reflecting on the times we're living in. I'm reading bizarrely quite a number of kind of apocalyptic books on what happens if, and unwittingly I'm reading one just now, which is it's kind of like a kind of plague that's hit the world, and it's actually far worse than we have it just now. So you think this is bad, but there's many more stages of bad we will hopefully never get to. So interesting. And what's it like been for you the last couple of years, Ollie? Have you got off the beaten track? Have you kind of explored other parts of Australia? I know we've had limits to our travel, but where have you got to?
We would love to have got more off the beaten track, but it has been hard, obviously, especially this year. And then I have a daughter, so with school holidays, I have to be quite sort of careful about what we do. What we have done this year, which has been fantastic and made a huge difference, because we all love the water, is we bought a kayak, which I think has been kind of something that I've seen a number of people go down this path. We're very lucky that we're within that kind of catchment zone, 5 kilometers to some water access. And so we bought one before it was the winter holidays, because we knew how to do something to sort of keep my daughter entertained. And we just paddled around the harbor. And so we're very, very privileged to be able to do it. We discovered little islands that I had never been to, such as Clark Island, which is just off Darling Point, and it's a little national park. It's got some bush, and you can walk around. It's got lots of great history. My daughter will sort of, I think there's one trip she didn't love, but I had the idea to put on a history podcast, again, Love the History, where I heard the history of the midget submarines coming into the harbor. And you could literally follow their route whilst listening in the life jacket. Wow. To where exactly they routed through Garden Island, all the way up to sort of Taylor Bay, where one of them was felled. And yeah, I think I enjoyed that more than her, to be frank. But it was it's cool what you can do. If anything, COVID has taught us to appreciate our very local surroundings, and living in Sydney is an immense privilege. And so I've really tried to engage with that.
Fantastic. Let's get into it, Ollie. Now you're sitting as a regional director, managing director of the Reckitt business, but your pathway if there's one core function is sales, you've done other things as you've gone through, but you started out as a grad at Mars and moved into that sales space. Was that always was that always going to be the pathway for you? Did you think of other ways forward?
Yeah, look, I did. When I say this to Australians, they kind of sort of frown. They can't believe it. But I did a sort of an arts degree in the UK. So I did Spanish and Portuguese at university. And I did them because I just loved languages. I loved culture, communicating to people. That made me very kind of happy. But when I got into the second or third year and spoke to the kind of careers department, it does limit a little bit of where you can probably enter industry, which wasn't the worst thing because I didn't want to go into like finance or anything too hectic. My brother did that. So out of kind of brotherly competitiveness, I felt like I had to do something slightly different. I thought sales would be a good fit because of the language kind of, let's say, skill, and because I liked people. And then the only other aspect is that I love being creative. I love coming up with ideas. That's something that I get a kick out of. So having spoken to many people at that time, consumer goods, working with brands was the obvious place to sort of like start having a look and applying. And I was very lucky to get a job on the sales graduate program at Mars, working in Waltham, just outside of Nottingham, in their pet office where you can bring in your dogs. And it was like, it was amazing. So that's what led me there. And no, I don't think I've looked back, Mike. It's been terrific. I love sales, so I'm very much a sales-oriented, general manager. I don't think that will surprise people. And I'm very fortunate that certainly for the last 11 years, I work in a business where I can do the two things I love, which is being creative, and people entertaining my ideas, and that's very important to me. And the other is leading teams and making people feel satisfied. And if you can have that, then you're ultimately, I think, going to be very happy. So no, I don't see any kind of need to change anything.
Yeah, great. Was there a job that you did in the early stage of your career, Ollie, that that you look back and you think that really formed me? That was the job that made me feel I'm absolutely on the right path.
Absolutely. So my first line management job, I was in Australia. I was doing a category role on the Coles team, and the Woolies NBM role came up, and I remember thinking that would be fantastic. Obviously, it's the kind of the ace role in this terrific market, and I said, please, can I do the job? I think I could do it, and I had the opportunity, and immediately then went from running no team to a team of maybe 7 people. I think it was 7 or 8 people, and your sense of fulfillment doubles as soon as, well, certainly for me, as soon as you lead a team, because you're not just worrying about your own prerogatives or whatever negotiation you're working on as an account manager or inputting Siebel. You're suddenly caretaking and providing kind of the vision for a broader group. And your job satisfaction magnifies because you can make their jobs easier. You can create a sense of fun. It was like light and day. So for the account managers out there, or kind of NAEs and execs, I kind of encourage you all to hold on for a few years. Enjoy the early experience of negotiating. I know inputting into Siebel and some of the systems is mind-numbing, but once you get into the kind of that middle sort of level, it's like you go on a different career because you've got a great sense of care. And I think if you feel fulfilled, then you're going to be very happy in your job. So yeah, that was the transition for me, certainly.
Great. Those who are on the live call today, guys, there's a chat facility, so feel free to drop any questions that you'd like, and I'll keep an eye on those and throw those to Ollie as we go. But if not, I've got plenty of questions up my sleeve to ask, so that's all good. Was there a stage that you felt during your career, I could be a managing director, I could run a business? Does that kind of, do you get to that point at any stage?
Look, I think at the outset of a career, that's the sort of the ultimate job down the line. So I would say probably sort of relatively early on, I thought that would be a great thing to do, mainly because I thought it would be great to be able to control not only the broader business direction, but also the culture, kind of like the journey. So I would love to get there. I never thought, to be very clear as well, that I could do that, for many, many, many years. My experience has always been to focus on the job I'm doing, the job in hand, and just trying to do the best I can, Jan to December, to nail the job, and never really looking too far ahead. I think that can be a little bit maybe distracting, but probably 6 months before I had this opportunity, maybe 6 to 9 months. If I'm honest, I probably started feeling, I think I'm almost there. But that came from having the experience to work with 3 excellent general managers when I was in the US, when I was in the UK, to see how they operate, to be in all the operating model meetings, to see how all the critical decisions are made. And probably to come to the realization, which hopefully can reduce some anxiety or increase people's confidence, which is no GM, no CEO is some omnipotent kind of force of knowledge, who has every functional knowledge, sewed up and knows exactly what they're going to do. It just doesn't happen. Every GM I've worked with has a functional grounding in something, finance, marketing. They have an area that they can maximize their results. And then they must work with their team. And their team are a bunch of very qualified functional experts, supply chain directors, finance directors. So once you realize that, you feel a lot better. So I think a mixture of the experience I had, seeing many people operate at that level, and then realizing that it's not all about me, it's about my team. And I'm very, very lucky that I have a fantastic leadership team. So a team that I knew because I worked alongside many of them. And I trust them and I work with them. I know what I'm relatively good at, which is hopefully sales. But otherwise, I work with my team. And occasionally you've got to use your gut instinct and you'll make some mistakes, but that gives me a lot of confidence. There are very few jobs where you walk into a team with functional experts. Prior to this job, you always have to be the most knowledgeable person. So it's that's a very different feel. You always have to be the most knowledgeable salesperson, one everyone looks to. Here you look to each other, so it makes it a lot cooler.
That's a very different dynamic, isn't it? From
absolutely.
And it probably places a very different emphasis on team as well. Which is interesting. So if I do you then think, Ollie, in your role? Well, what next? I know you're still reasonably new into your role, but did you go on and run bigger businesses, or do you kind of think further ahead, or what is that? Where does the MD or the general manager go?
Yeah, look, to be truthful, I just want to do a very, very good job. This is my first general manager job. I'm just over a year into it. I expect to be into this in this role for many years. To run the ANZ region is a huge privilege. So I don't think that. All I want to do is leave a legacy in this role. And as a team, we came together at the very outset and said, what do we as a team want to achieve over the next few years? Aside from our results, which at Reckitt, I think we do always a very good job. We're very performance oriented. And we've spoken about it for many months. And we said, we want to turn this business from a business that has a culture of outperformance, maybe even overperformance, to a business that still retains performance, but it's one that's people and purpose led. It's a place that you go to not just to deliver great results. It's a place you go to and become super proud that you work here because of what we do, because of how we treat our teams. And that's a big journey that we're now on. And it is by no means complete. And my number one goal is to continue to deliver great results with my team, but to be successful in completing this cultural journey over the next few years. Then I might imagine something, but certainly we're not there yet.
Yeah, well, that's not an easy shift to make, is it? I think from the outside looking in, there's very visible and vocal indicators of that cultural shift, which is great. But to your point, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. The performance culture that makes Reckitt has to be there, but it's getting that balance right. But from a leadership point of view, what a great challenge to try and manage that change effectively whilst maintaining the integrity of performance as well.
Yeah, no, it's a super exciting challenge. Obviously made a bit more exciting by this kind of a crazy context that we're all going through. But in some ways, the context allows you to make inroads more quickly. I think if you look at how we've responded to COVID, we've put in place flexible work policies. We've done things that I don't think anyone would expect. So you need to look at every context as an opportunity to magnify your broader aim. And that's what we're doing. But yeah, a few more years in it yet, Mike, but we're very passionate about it. So I'm very, very happy in role and not looking too much further ahead.
Right. The purpose of the program, the Sales Director Incubator, the Marketing Director Incubator, as we put them together on the podcast, Your Future in Sales and Marketing, is to help people think about their careers more effectively, Ollie, and to give insights that it's hard to get. Now, for you, as somebody whose career's got to this point, where do you seek your advice from? In terms of, whether is it mentors or is it bosses or when you're facing into a decision about career, who do you go to?
I would go to a mentor, and often maybe some industry professionals as well, because sometimes the advice you get is quite specific to various markets that you want to work in. But in our business, I have a mentor from within the business who's a senior vice president, works in the Asian region, and I go to him maybe every 6 months. I think every kind of mentor relationship works to your kind of tune, and he's a terrific individual who's been all around the globe, and he's super kind of optimistic. He's got a great positive outlook, and he hasn't necessarily given advice recently about the next role because it hasn't been my interest. It's more the next year, which we're facing, which is going to be another kind of turbulent one. But you always get a great piece of advice. So the most recent piece of advice was looking to next year, put a good plan together, and then don't stress too much if it changes. I think everyone in this Australian context is about to go through, especially in sales, with kind of like the cost inflation we're seeing and supply chain volatility. It's going to be another tricky year, but we now know that. So he likened it to getting onto the airplane, the pilot coming on and announcing that it's going to be a turbulent flight, and you're getting a bit sort of nervous, buckling up the seatbelt, but then looking around and seeing your entire team there and basically saying, look, we're in this together. No one worry about it. We're going to go forward. We've got a good plan, but we might have to tack left. We might have to tack right, and no one's going to judge anyone. And we're going to learn from this, and we're going to have a great experience. And just that little 30-second kind of soundbite made a huge difference to my outlook. And now I have the opportunity to sort of instill that within the team as well. So it's terrific having mentors. I would encourage everyone to kind of suit one who hopefully works for you and brings maybe a different angle, because they've been very helpful, certainly in my career.
I think that's really interesting practical advice you've just given there, Ollie, around the next 12 months, because, as we started to settle into what felt like more of a rhythm, we're hit again with another challenge to the society we live in. From an FMCG work context, it is going to be another interesting year, but your view is just focus on what you can control?
Yeah, I'm genuinely very excited by the challenge for a few reasons. Firstly, we know them. So the last 2 years, challenges have kind of just emerged. So COVID from the outset 2 years ago, wow, just a huge game changer. We responded to it. The biggest challenge was probably how we worked from home and everything else. This year, it was what's going to happen to the sales post the COVID. No one really knew, so it was ambiguous. And then the second aspect was probably some of the recent supply chain and kind of freight issues that have crept in the second half of the year, which makes it a bit uncomfortable. Next year, we can see it. We can see the cost inflation. We can see that supply chain will remain volatile. So firstly, we know them. Second truth, everyone's going through the same issues. Everyone in the industry, the retailers, everyone's going, oh, this is a generational kind of moment. And because of that, people shouldn't worry about it. Right? We're all in the same boat. I always find that quite a reassuring kind of message. And then the exciting part of it is, for me, there's only upside to how we kind of face into challenges that we've never faced before. You can only do your best. But if you break through, so just imagine a world where, anyone who's here or a business is able to go, we can offset some of the inflationary challenges. We can still drive very decent category growth. We can market our brands effectively, and we can grow next year and do a great job. That would feel amazing. It's like, win the FA Cup. And we've all got this unique opportunity, almost a once in a career opportunity to learn so much. And there's only upside for how you deal with it, because everyone's going to be doing the same kind of stuff. There's only learnings and upside. So I don't feel any sense that we can fail in the next 12 months, because none of us have gone through this before. Yeah. And I find that exciting. But if you weave your way through, if you thread it perfectly, how cool would that be?
Yeah.
So that's why I'm actually quite excited.
Great. Looking at career advice, Ollie, I get approached obviously by people who come to me in moments of well-structured, thoughtful, planning around the right time to change, and sometimes it's frustration with their current environment. They're not moving on fast enough. If someone's on today's call or on the podcast thinking, I feel now's my moment. I've worked really well. I'm performing at my best. I'm ready for the next step, but nothing's really happening in my business. What should they do? What would your advice be to that person?
Very simply, I would reach out to your kind of line manager and have a conversation. Actually, I would go further. I would reach out to your line manager and the HR team and carefully plan and have a productive conversation. So probably two ways of this happening. If I look at what typically happens in my experience, because it's not an easy conversation. So that's the first thing, because people feel kind of nervous, and rightfully so, kind of pushing their agenda or kind of getting into a kind of more demanding conversation. Invariably, this can happen in a bar or, at some kind of opportune time where an individual thinks it's appropriate to start a conversation about, the fact that they feel it's totally inappropriate. You're not going to have a productive conversation. Your boss is going to be unawares of the conversation. They're not going to be prepared for it. You're going to get inconsistent, and you're probably going to speak to someone else. Don't do that. It'll be misleading. It'll create confusion. Do tell your line manager that next week, give them time, you would like to sit down for an hour over lunch and have a conversation about next steps with your career. Tell them that you feel that you've achieved X, Y, and Z on your kind of annual objectives list, and you feel that you're ready for the next stage, and you'd really like their detailed view of how they see you at this moment, and have they achieved everything, or is there anything else? And send across then an email with all the information that you kind of see as why you believe you're there, and then do the same to the HR director, and then let them think about it. And then what you're going to have is a much better encounter in a week's time, where you arrive at a meeting where someone's really thought through it, because they'll care about getting it just right. They'll have seen your perspective, they'll have read it, and the quality of the feedback and clarity you'll get about your next step will be infinitely higher. That would be my advice. So have the conversation, but plan it and give people time to respond accordingly. Don't do it suddenly in a moment, and expect a good answer that's going to be helpful, and that's going to be true to what happens. Yeah, that's my advice.
Good practical advice. I also think too that that conversation shouldn't be the result of a vent letting off steam. It should be an iterative conversation that you have on an ongoing basis with your line manager. So there is no, as you say, trapped at the bar, shocked, surprise conversation, which is the worst time to have it. But it happens so much.
It is, and use whatever you have in your business. So we have a mid-year catch-up, which is formalized, which we're doing a much better job of doing a proper kind of detailed, robust assessment. And then we have the end of year. So you should have two very natural moments to have that conversation, but it's not to say you can't ask for a third. And any line manager is going to entertain that, but just give them the time to give you good feedback. Yeah, that's the main thing.
Yeah. One of the areas around career management, there's obviously a perception that profile plays a big part, that you have to be on the radar. You have to kind of manage the balance of people knowing, what you're doing, and the right people understanding the impact you're having. Now, rightly or wrongly, I'm not sure that's entirely a correct view, but what's interesting clearly in COVID, that those kind of the ability to manage profile is changed. From your perspective, how do people get that right? That this whole concept of managing my profile within an organization, because it's been a very different couple of years for people to do that as well.
It certainly has. I think my broad view on this, but potentially a little bit old school, but it starts very much with this basis. The very first thing you can do to manage your profile is to do a very, very good job in what you're doing. And I know that sounds a bit cliche, but it's true. I've never seen someone who's doing an excellent job struggle to be noticed because people love seeing people do well. Everyone loves going, wow, this individual, look what they did yesterday. They'll forward you an email because it's exciting because we're all kind of human. So 90% of your attention should be focused on doing a good job. And I think that's been just as true in this COVID kind of world where we've had many people join during this situation, and they haven't met people yet sort of physically. But you can still see, over Teams and Zoom, that they're doing a fantastic job. And you still hear those sound bites. That hasn't changed. That hasn't been my experience. The one thing there is obviously less of is the opportunity to build maybe sort of more kind of social relationships in the last 2 years. But there are certain other opportunities. For me, Profile is just about building relationships, full stop. And so what there has been in the last 2 years is many other kind of working groups and challenges. So I can only speak to our experience, but we have a people council, we have wellbeing committees, we have a diversity inclusion board, we have a process council, we have a purpose council focused on the work we do with water security on Finish or Meals on Wheels with Glen 20. All these are groups of volunteers. We have about 50% of the business who volunteer. This replaces any kind of social interaction at the bar, which I think is a bit sort of old school anyway, and it's kind of gone. So my advice would be in the current moments, do a great job and then volunteer your time to various other kind of aspects that are going on in the culture of your organization, because you'll meet people. Even on a screen, you'll meet them. And you'll have a chat and you'll start learning something else about the business and you'll form relationships, which invariably will always help you. So I think it can still be done. And I've seen so many good examples of it. So that's why I'm convinced it can be done just as easily. You just need to seek a different group environment, which is why I would volunteer and just always accept challenges that come your way.
Yeah. And Reckitt's well set up with that infrastructure, I guess, for those who might be in smaller businesses where there's not so many obvious pathways to volunteering, for example, then I guess there's nothing to stop you doing it yourself and actually creating momentum and actually setting up something you're passionate about and actually being the instigator.
Absolutely. Great advice. So if that's you're going to make a exponentially bigger impression if there's something that you just do of your own back, of your own accord. People are going to think, wow. So go for it. I think our industry is incredibly exciting at the moment. If you look at the role our brands play now versus a decade ago, consumers demand we do better. And so I think in every kind of business, whether it be brands that used to stand for efficacy and now are standing for much more purposeful kind of aspects, forums are opening up where you can do good things that make you feel more fulfilled, which is great. We didn't have this 2 decades ago.
Yeah.
So get involved in them, or if they don't exist, to your point, Mike, create them, because people are going to really enjoy it and people are going to join you for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the questions I love asking leaders, Ollie, is around the recruitment process, and whether it's people going through a process within their organization or externally. When you meet candidates for a role, what do the candidates who do well do that makes them stand out?
So probably a few things, and I'll try and kind of summarize. I'll just speak a little bit and then summarize. The first thing is they plan for the interview. And by this, I mean, there are always going to be 5 to 10 pretty similar questions that are going to come up. And it's notable always with people who just come in and kind of wing it versus those that go, they're probably going to ask me what my strengths are. They're probably going to ask me to give an example of when I've led something. And they've taken the time to really carefully construct that answer. So you know exactly what they've done, and they've put KPIs against it, and they've made it relevant to your business area. And you think, good for you. You've gone extra little bit of effort and you've made a huge impression. So that's the first thing, plan. The second is explore the company. Again, give it that extra effort. It's one thing knowing the values of the business, which are likely to come up. They're always going to be ingrained in the Q&A of I think, most kind of companies when you join. But Google, search a few more things that are going on. There's so much stuff out there. Because when someone asks a question about an issue we might be facing, the fact that they've done that impresses. I think good for you again. Like this is you may have called us off guard. That's a really good question. That's impressive. You think this person is making more effort, and effort isn't a very attractive kind of a quality when you're interviewing someone. So those would be the first two. The third, which I think is the most important, is being authentic, building a bit of a connection, and not trying to be someone you think the company wants, because it won't work. My favorite question that I will ask in any interview, and again, I think it's a pretty common one, is, aside from telling me what you're very good at, what's your biggest development area? What's the thing you don't love doing? And that question is so simple, but it's your moment to be really real and say, you know what? I don't like doing this. I hate admin. Some of the details sometimes I stuff up, and I should probably prioritize it better. If you say something like that, it might feel uncomfortable, but you're going to impress the heck out of everyone who's listening, because you've taken a risk, you've been mature, you've been honest, and that's someone we can work with, because that is a hugely admirable quality. What you invariably get, though, Mike, is the classic answer of something. I just work too hard sometimes. I get involved in everything, and I'm working. I've just got to slow down. And you think, oh, I don't want to hear that. That's not cool. I want to hear you be a little bit vulnerable, so that we can get to know you and feel like we trust you, which works both ways. But it's such a great quality. So I would say, in summary, do the prep, prepare your answers, investigate the business, and then be a bit vulnerable, be honest, because you want to create that connection. And don't be afraid about talking about things that you're working on. Everyone's working on something. It's just life. Those would be
That's really, really good practical advice, Ollie. For me, the defining part of any interview is the third part of what you mentioned there around that development space. No matter what level, if I'm recruiting for the most senior role or mid-level role, someone's ability to talk about what they're working on, what their development areas are, is critical. And the amount of people who try and spin that into this my weakness is that I overuse my positives. I'm like, well, it's just so lacking in authenticity. You're not letting me in. You're just putting up the veneer and the shutters, and I don't feel I know you. It's not a smart answer. It may feel like one, but it's not. So I really want to hear the actual stuff that you're not good at, and it's your comfort with talking about that tells me a lot about you or otherwise.
A huge amount. You think about the objective of any interview. Two things. You want to demonstrate functional competency for a specific role, account manager, NBM, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Then, and more importantly, you want to create trust. And it's very hard, right? So it's a unique skill in an hour to sort of come across like this is someone who would work diligently and authentically for you. But those are your two objectives. I think that the second one somehow gets overlooked a little bit, because people are so focused on the KPIs they've achieved and nailing that functional expertise. But the second one is, I would say, arguably more important.
Yeah, I think so. Because, I agree. Most people technically will be at a level you can make that assessment, but you're really interested in the deeper person. But good advice there, and take heed, people. That's really, really good points. Well, I'd love to spend a bit of time just looking forward, in particular in your role. You've led a business for the first time, a large business, through some really complex times. We're all kind of managing our way through a difficult period, but there's been obviously a lot of opportunity. It's been a lot of fun as well. We've got to this point, and we'll continue to go. But there's been a few really interesting things that I reckon we've learned and are still learning. One of them that I know is a passion of yours, and it's one that I look at with some confusion sometimes, is when I look at the world of e-com. So e-com is only going one way. It's only getting bigger. Yet it still feels like an adjunct channel for so many organizations, a kind of a bolt-on, we should do this. And consequently, it feels to me that on one hand, organizations perhaps underinvest and people don't necessarily take it that seriously. In your perspective, as an MD or GM, how much should organizations, particularly in the FMCG world, be investing in e-com in terms of people and resource to start with?
I think it is easily the biggest thing. that people should be investing in resource in. Yeah. It's so I'm very passionate about it. So thanks for bringing it up, Mike. It often gets portrayed as the future, as some kind of distant future that we've got time to get ourselves ready for. But it's very much the present, especially in the last 2 years. Obviously, we've seen a huge kick up. If we speak to our performance, it was nigh on 7% of the business 2 years ago. Now it's going to close nearer 20. So it's doubling each year. It's no longer some small business that grows that's not driving the contribution of your actual growth. It's a scale business flying. I mean, what's more compelling? And if you take its trajectory and you go forward and you make a logical assumption that, well, if it's near 20 now, in the next 5 years, I think it's probably reasonable to assume it will double again. Then in 5 years' time, this is almost going to be the majority of our businesses. That's a huge insight. So take a step back. Most jobs last, what, 2.5 years? So in your next 2 jobs, and this is what I encourage everyone to think about, if you're not getting exposure to e-com, if you're not understanding the language, search ROI, all the various other aspects of how you promote differently with displays and banners, content A+ to C+, if you don't get that, you're going to be left behind. To the point that if you go 10 years ahead, you will not be a CEO or a regional director if you haven't had some stint in this area, because you credibly will not be able to lead any business because it'll be the majority of your business. So this is why I kind of maybe pull my hair out a bit on the subject, because it's so palpable. And I would love people to get more into it. I've been on a journey myself. The team reports into myself purposefully here, really, so I can selfishly learn, and understand this, because it's so important. So I really encourage everyone to think about that. You asked for career advice previously, and one thing I would tag to it is my biggest career advice for everyone would be think about how in the next 2 roles you really get to grips, understand this, and ideally, get a job in this space, or digital from a marketing lens, or supply e-commerce if you're in that function, because it's the future.
Mm. In some organizations, it still feels, well, it is for many organizations still not seen as important, and it's lumped together with alternate channels and a whole bunch of other things, because it's either measured differently, or it's not seen yet as strategically important, and therefore, so some people on the call might be thinking, that's good advice, but there's no jobs. There's no job in my business. What can I do to actually get that experience if it doesn't appear to exist?
Yeah, I feel like you may be leading me somewhere, or I could give a very simple answer. But hopefully, those who are on this call will be in businesses that reconsider, given that the e-commerce business has doubled twice in 2 years. So hang in there. There should be lots of roles. We've trebled the size of our business in the last year. We're adding loads more roles next year. Digital marketing roles, I think, will be one of the first, because we have to. We want to get ahead of this. So if you get desperate, send an email across to the team. But I'm sure everyone will be seeing lots of e-commerce roles crop up in the next few years. And ask proactively. Ask your bosses and say, hey, what's down the line? Are we going to do something about this? Because even this year, it's driven the majority of our growth through Woolies and Coles. So that's a fact. The majority of our contribution of net revenue growth comes through their e-commerce stores. This is what I mean when I say it's already here. It's the lion's share of growth. And if you go to the UK, a market I was lucky enough to work in, it was the majority of the growth there for many years. It still is. So it's very much here. And you're going to see a big move, I think, from everyone very soon, if it hasn't happened already in your organization.
Yeah. And I guess my underlying point, hopefully it wasn't too leading, but was actually, if you are in a business that doesn't quite see it yet, then to the previous point around volunteering, then maybe it's incumbent on you to bring it to the fore, to actually try and change the ship, because it doesn't need to be the CEO who does that.
It doesn't. And what's cool about it is we're all relatively knowledgeable in it, right? Everyone's got an iPhone, which now is where over 60% of transactions are done on that little iPhone. We all kind of know the experience. So we've all got a broad opinion on it. It's not like we're entering something we have no knowledge of. But the sooner you do it, the bigger impression you have. And if I look at some of the grads who've joined recently and gone into this space in our business, within a year, they're kind of almost leading voices in some of these areas. How cool is that? So you can come in and you can be one of the top tier kind of authorities on a specialist, aspect of maybe content creation. So you can make your mark very quickly in this area as well. So definitely get involved and give your opinions on the matter.
Great. We're starting to go back to the office now, and hopefully that will continue. How do you think organizations will see the world of work going forwards, Ollie? It's become a question that candidates ask, almost as the first question is, how does X or Y organization, deal with flexibility? It's their window onto culture immediately, whereas obviously 2 years ago, it was a question, but it wasn't really seriously asked. But what do you think the future looks like?
Well, I hope the future reflects the experience that every business has had the last 2 years, which has been seeing a remarkable effort from our teams react to this pandemic and then work incredibly well from a home setup and engender huge amounts of trust. It's been kind of eye-opening 2 years from that perspective. So kind of our view on it is continue the trust. It's very clear that if you leave your teams to their own devices, they'll do a fantastic job. And often they'll be even more productive in it. And it allows them to be much happier, and it's what the majority of people want. So I would hope that organizations learn from the experience and all pursue a very flexible working culture, because I think it can work very well. Not to say that, it's not going to be sort of advantageous to pop into the office and meet people. That there are always going to be great occasions to do that, for team meetings, and we're going to try and instill that very much in our business through a very clear roadmap. But overarching, trust is the main takeout. Trust your teams. They've done a great job in the last 2 years. They deserve it. And I hope everyone embraces fully flexible working cultures.
Yeah, because I think there's always a little trepidation, perhaps for the mid-level or more junior people around how real is this going to be? Do you talk flexibility about should I be in the office every day or not? And I guess every business has its own take, but it feels even some of the more traditional businesses or older school leaders, have come some way. I think those who haven't and snap back to their old view of if you're not in the office, you're not working. I think it's going to be a pretty short-lived business culture.
Yeah, I think they're going to struggle, to be quite frank. When you say it like that, it's almost insulting. So if that's the perspective, that some businesses are going to completely ignore the 2 year experience and then go back to how it was before because they simply maybe don't have the same trust in their teams, or I think they're going to struggle from a recruitment perspective, because to your point, that question that used to take place a few years ago, often it was at the end of an interview and it would sound something like, what's your policy on flexible working? And if you were someone, it was kind of like an important question to some people, but it wasn't like the question. It's now one of the questions. It's one of the top 2 questions anyone's going to ask when they consider a business, because I think ultimately it reflects the culture of that business very, very clearly from the outset. It's basically saying, do you trust your teams quite a lot? It's a very different question now. So what's your kind of view on flexible working? That's a big answer, and you better get it right. Otherwise, I feel like you're going to lose a lot of talent. So our position on it is very clear. And we see lots of other organizations doing the same. And I think it's a great future. And I still think it's a future in which you can build a career, be present, come in, build connections, because we've seen that in the last 18 months. So I'm not so concerned about that.
Yeah, I think you've given some very practical advice today, Ollie, on how that can be done. I think it's not about the social function anymore, or there's a lot of ways you can build profile and have impact. I think I'd love to think most businesses have learned, and certainly there's some very, very progressive views out there now around how companies are viewing flexibility and allowing people to blend their work and life, and that trust component, I think, is actually probably one of the most rewarding consequences of COVID, is that the level of trust has just gone up between the employee and employer, and life has become better because of it. So it's certainly an upside, I think. Ollie, we're out of time. That's That's our 45 minutes. It's gone quickly.
Very quickly, very quickly.
So thanks for sharing so much, and there's a lot of great advice in there. So appreciate you coming on and contributing to the program. It's been wonderful chatting this morning.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you for the opportunity. And I think it's a great thing you've done over the last 2 years. As you were saying before we started, almost 40 of these sessions, which I think make a huge difference to people listening, and a huge difference to our industry as well. So, excellent work, and thank you for having me on.
Thanks very much. Guys, today's session will be on the podcast in a week's time, Your Future in Sales and Marketing, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Please like and subscribe. It helps others find us and does wonders for our ego as well. The next and final live session of the year is on a week today, actually, with Robbie Lawson, who's now of Google, once of Mars, Unilever, and other FMCG organizations. So we're really going to explore that move from FMCG to tech, which will be super interesting. So looking forward to that. Jump onto the live session or download the podcast when it lands in a couple of weeks. But thanks again, Ollie, for today. That was really good. And have a great day, everybody.